Who's the best character? It doesn't matter. Goku can beat him. How many of you have heard that phrase before? How many? How many? Be honest here. So, for everyone who doesn't get why I'm starting a thing about power with Goku, wow, have you just never heard of Goku? I'm sorry. My apologies. I hope, like, in a way, I'm glad for you, but at the same time, how have you not heard of Goku? So, for everybody else, no, I'm not actually a Goku fan. I don't really like Dragon Ball Z, and I don't like any of the Dragon Balls, really. And we're gonna get into why. So, for anyone who doesn't know what we're about to talk about, it's power scaling. And Dragon Ball and all of its iterations are just miserable at it. They suck. It's terrible. It's the same thing every time. So, before we do that, let's talk about power scaling and its associated trope of power creep so that you have a base understanding of what we're doing. So, in its simplest form to understand, power scaling and power creep is just what happens to characters over a long period of time in the same series when they are faced with problems that they need to grow stronger in order to solve. This results in a character from page 1, where they're particularly weak, to page however much you're on the end, where they're effectively a god, or perhaps a demigod. And this doesn't necessarily mean just in strength, this can be in detective skills as well. So, if you have Batman page 1, like when he's learning to be Batman, sure, he's good enough at being a detective, but it's not like towards the end of his thing where the dude's basically omniscient. So the reason this happens is primarily because whenever you're looking at a particular character, an audience is drawn to that character for some reason. So taking the Batman example, he's a crime fighter and a detective. So naturally speaking, in order to have a problem for Batman that the readers of Batman are going to want to see him solve, he needs to have a detective problem. So what this means is that over time, as you see Batman solve the same crimes over and over, it becomes boring. So in order to keep the readers invested, writers will write more complicated plots. But that means you have to start taking shortcuts because you don't suddenly get more pages in the book. So what you used to have was a simple robbery over 40 pages and you could have the whole thing play out. And then you end up with a really long, complicated mass robbery of 30 banks and you have 40 pages to resolve it. So what you end up with is a ton of narrative shortcuts taken for Batman in his detective work. That means, functionally speaking, he might as well just know everything anyways. And this tends to happen in every genre of all stories, simply because this is the easiest way to quote-unquote raise the stakes. Now, mind you, this isn't a universal rule. This is just a trope that tends to happen because it's easy. But it does mean that the longer you spend in a particular franchise, the more you're going to start feeling the patterns of that franchise, and you're going to start recognizing that even though things are getting bigger and badder, it's still effectively the same thing 50 times. So for another example, take Marvel all the way from Iron Man to Avengers Endgame. And functionally speaking, it's like 3 movies. It's just rewritten with a bunch of different flavors. If you don't believe me, go rewatch Iron Man 1, 2, and 3 and tell me there is a significant difference in any of those plots. You can't. There isn't. It's the same movie 3 times, effectively. But that said, by the time you hit Iron Man 3, there's Iron Man suits literally everywhere. And that's power creep. Because you have the ability to solve a problem in one manner, in order to continue making more difficult problems for your characters to solve, in this case Iron Man, you need something that would require a bigger suit, effectively. Or a better one, or something more complicated. And eventually you get Iron Man having just 50 suits flying around. You have him cause Age of Ultron by having a bunch of drones running around. And then by the time he dies, he's got nanotechnology with holographic shields. It just, things continue to get out of hand. So, looping back to Goku and Dragon Ball and all that, this is why I hate it. It just does the same thing. Every single enemy, it is, they show up, they smack down some people, they might kill 1 or 2, who cares? They're going to be resurrected by the Dragon Balls anyways. But they smack down a few people, Goku gets angry, and then he fights them with newly colored hair or more hair or something like that. And it's the same plot 50 times. And it's presented as not, mind you, it's not Dragon Ball presenting this, it's fans. But it's fans present Dragon Ball as some like ultimate anime. And I'm like, no, you just have the same dude punching things slightly harder consistently, and eventually you're blowing up planets. So, how do you avoid this problem? Well, basically, you got to get good at writing, and I know nobody wants to hear that answer, but that is what you have to do. So, to be a bit friendlier about it, the answer is present problems that aren't easily or readily solvable the same way you've been solving problems. Just because you have a character of a certain level of strength does not mean they will be able to solve every single problem with brute force. Now, I understand this runs the risk of people saying, well, you're going to get people disinterested in your story, but if you're running the same fight scene with the same resolution where everybody knows by the end of Dragon Ball, everybody knows what's going to happen is things are going to occur, Goku's going to get angry, and he's going to beat the crap out of somebody. And that's going to be the resolution. So, to avoid it, you have to give Goku a problem that he can't just beat the crap out of. And, well, Dragon Ball doesn't do that. Now, part of that problem is because Goku is a very flat character. He's got 3 moods: hungry, happy, and angry. So there isn't a lot to work with there. But for most characters, you do have room to work with. There is more character there. And what you do is you present them with other ways of handling things or different types of problems. And one of the most effective stories that I've ever seen do this was the Artemis Fowl series. Not the movie. That doesn't count. It's a horrible thing. Never watch it. But the books were very good. They start with Artemis Fowl as a kid, and he is the bad guy. Now, mind you, throughout the books, he goes from being kind of the bad guy, and he is immediately a threat to this fairy world because he's going to expose them, to he ends up helping save the world through magic. But the story doesn't end there. So at one point in the books, you get a character called Opal Kobe, and there's an entire book written about this particular character. For everyone who wants to know, that book is the Opal Deception. It's book 4 in the series. So the Opal Deception starts with Captain Holly Short at this point. Holly Short has been a running, recurring character. She's effectively main character number 2, other than Artemis himself. And it begins with Opal Kobe framing Holly for murdering her commander. And then it gets darker because she then kills off Butler. So that's 2 major deaths in a series where Artemis Fowl has lost 0 people to this point. See, one of the running themes for the first 3 books is that Artemis Fowl, even though he's very self-centered, he's also unwilling to hurt people. Like, he's inherently a good kid, but he was raised under a crime family. So that means for 3 books, nobody dies. And then you start 4 with 2 major deaths. Now, what this means is that for the rest of the book, there is no world-ending plot. Like, there's just not. The whole goal, Opal Kobe's plan, is just kind of specific revenge. She got foiled earlier, and she's really mad at Artemis, basically, and she wants to take out Artemis and Holly. But it's very specific to him. So even though the stakes are, technically speaking, a lot lower than saving the world, it has been raised because it's now very personal. And this is how you avoid power scaling and power creep in any kind of writing. You take a problem that you've previously had, you said, okay, you have all these skills. How do I invalidate your primary way of doing things while still allowing you to use your skills in a new way? And when your only skill is punching things, it's hard to do because, well, you can only punch things. But when you have a character that has any level of intelligence, which is most of them, you can actually take this and rewrite stories so that you go from being able to just indiscriminately punch something, you're like, all right, just take out the big bad at whatever cost, to, okay, how do I win the fight, but also not lose people in the process? Because that's what Artemis fails at immediately in the 4th book. That's what makes all the stakes, is it goes from being, all right, you know, the world may be in danger, but happy fun times, we're all going to be okay. And then book 4, nope, people have died. It becomes very serious very quickly because the stakes are not the same. So, in conclusion, Try to avoid just making things bigger. I understand it's the easiest way to do it, but if you're going to just make things bigger and bigger, you're going to end up with just planet-sized monstrosities killing each other, and it gets out of hand, and your viewers already know how it's going to end. So instead, try to change the way things go. Try to change up how you resolve problems. Do things that don't necessarily need you to just gain more strength. And that's all I've got for you tonight. Y'all have a good day.